10 years on, what do we now know about the disappearance of MH370?
What if I told you that the world's most famous missing airplane, the mystery that has baffled investigators for over a decade, might finally have some chilling new clues? Reports suggest that an underwater drone went deep beneath the ocean and captured footage that is nothing short of terrifying. This isn't just about a missing plane anymore. It's about what the ocean was hiding all along. Let's dive into the haunting story of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, the search that became one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history, and why the latest underwater discoveries have everyone holding their breath. The flight that vanished. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur, bound for Beijing. It carried 239 passengers and crew, people from all walks of life, expecting nothing more than a routine overnight flight. But less than an hour after departure, the aircraft suddenly went off radar, leaving behind silence, confusion, and shock. Air traffic controllers tried to make contact. Families waited anxiously as news channels around the globe lit up with breaking news. A modern Boeing 777 had simply vanished. How could a plane of that size and sophistication disappear without a trace? It was a question that would dominate headlines for months and still echoes today. In those first hours, theories flew as fast as the rumors. Hijacking, technical failure, terrorism, everything was on the table. Yet the absence of wreckage was the most unsettling part. Planes that crash usually leave debris, but MH370 left almost nothing behind. It was as if the sky had swallowed it whole. The mystery was not only a tragedy but also a puzzle that stretched far beyond aviation. It tapped into humanity's deepest fears, the unknown, the unexplained, and the realization that even in the age of satellites, some things could still disappear without a trace. The endless search. For weeks, nations poured resources into the search for MH370. Dozens of ships, planes, and satellites scanned the skies and seas, from the Gulf of Thailand to the remote waters of the southern Indian Ocean. Every faint radar blip, every satellite ping was examined with urgency. By April 2014, investigators were convinced the aircraft had gone down in one of the most remote parts of the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from any coastline. It was a grave realization. The wreckage, if it existed, would be sitting miles beneath one of the deepest and roughest oceans on Earth. Families clung to hope, but as weeks turned into months and months into years, the story became less about recovery and more about a desperate quest for closure. Some pieces of debris eventually washed ashore on islands like Réunion and Madagascar, confirming the plane had indeed met its fate in the ocean. But those fragments only deepened the questions. Where was the main wreck? And why hadn't it been found? The Indian Ocean is vast, with trenches plunging nearly 24,000 feet. Searching it is like looking for a needle in a haystack the size of continents. Even with advanced sonar and satellite data, the task was monumental. Yet, the search pressed on, driven by equal parts duty, grief, and determination. The rise of underwater drones. When the conventional search for MH370 started hitting dead ends, the world realized something crucial. Human divers and even submarines were limited. The ocean's depth, its crushing pressure, and its vastness made manual searches almost impossible. That's when the conversation shifted toward underwater drones, machines built to withstand what no human could. These drones weren't just tools, they were a glimpse into a new era of exploration. Instead of risking human lives, scientists could now send unmanned vehicles into the abyss, letting technology brave the darkness. The rise of underwater drones was more than just a technological upgrade. It was a revolution. Unlike crude submarines, These drones were small, agile, and could cover wide areas for extended hours without rest. They didn't need oxygen, food, or comfort. All they needed was power and programming. For the first time in aviation history, the possibility of finding MH370 didn't depend on human endurance. It depended on how far these machines could go. Families of the missing passengers pinned their hopes on this new wave of technology, believing it might succeed where everything else had failed. What made drones especially valuable was their versatility. Some were designed with high-resolution cameras that could record hauntingly detailed images in total darkness. Others carried sonar systems that could scan the seabed, painting a picture of ridges, cliffs, and hidden valleys that had never been mapped before. These drones didn't just search for wreckage. They revealed alien-like landscapes on the ocean floor, uncovering features that scientists hadn't even known existed. In the process of chasing one mystery, humanity began unlocking hundreds of others. But the rise of underwater drones wasn't without its challenges. Deploying them in the Indian Ocean meant dealing with unpredictable weather, powerful currents, and crushing depths that could destroy even the strongest machine. A single malfunction could mean losing millions of dollars in technology. There were moments when drones returned damaged or didn't return at all, swallowed by the very environment they were sent to explore. Each failure was frustrating, yet each setback also highlighted the sheer danger of what these machines were up against. Despite those risks, the push for drone exploration grew stronger. Governments, research institutes, and even private companies began investing heavily in this technology. MH370 was the headline reason, but beneath that was a bigger truth. Humanity was starting to realize how little we knew about our oceans. We had mapped Mars more thoroughly than the deep sea, and drones offered a way to finally bridge that gap. In a way, the tragedy of MH370 accelerated interest in ocean technology, spurring a global race to develop smarter, tougher, and more precise underwater explorers. The rise of underwater drones has now left us with a strange paradox. On one hand, they represent hope, the possibility of finally solving a mystery that has tormented the world for years. On the other, the footage they bring back is often disturbing, showing us landscapes that look more like another planet than our own. It's haunting, it's mesmerizing, and it reminds us of one chilling fact. Sometimes, in our search for answers, we discover just how terrifying the unknown truly is. The ocean's graveyard. To understand why drones became crucial, you need to understand the ocean itself. The Indian Ocean is one of the least explored places on Earth. Its seafloor is not flat. It's a dramatic landscape of ridges, trenches, and volcanic formations. In many ways, it's as alien as Mars. The depth alone is staggering. At its deepest points, the pressure is more than 1,000 times what we feel at the surface. Light doesn't penetrate there, leaving eternal darkness where strange, otherworldly creatures lurk. This is not just water. It's a graveyard of forgotten ships and aircraft. For centuries, the sea has been swallowing human history. From colonial-era trade ships to modern vessels, thousands rest silently below. In that context, MH370 isn't alone, but it is unique. It is the only modern passenger plane of its size to vanish in such a way. The challenge of reaching these depths is why drones became essential. Unlike manned submarines, which are expensive and limited, drones can push farther, stay longer, and go places humans simply cannot survive. And it was one such drone that recently recorded something chilling, the first chilling discoveries. When underwater drones first began scanning the seabed, few expected them to capture anything beyond rocks, trenches, and sand. But one mission returned with footage that immediately caught attention. Among the still, lifeless terrain of the Indian Ocean floor, there appeared to be fragments of metal resting at odd angles. These shapes didn't look like the random chaos of geology. They looked human-made. as if torn apart by something violent. The realization that the drones might have stumbled across the remains of MH370 sent shockwaves through both the investigation team and the families waiting for answers. The footage showed twisted beams jutting out of the silt with surfaces that looked unnaturally smooth compared to surrounding rocks. Some pieces were half buried, as though they had been sitting there for years, slowly sinking deeper into the seabed. To the trained eye, these images carried subtle details that suggested aviation materials, curved edges, rivet-like patterns, and reflective surfaces that didn't belong to natural formations. It was the kind of discovery that raised hope, but also dread, because confirmation meant facing the full horror of what had happened. But the discoveries weren't just physical, they carried an emotional weight. For families, each new piece of possible wreckage was a bittersweet reminder. On one hand, it meant the truth might finally be within reach. On the other, it meant acknowledging that their loved ones were truly gone, resting in the cold silence of the ocean floor. The thought of belongings, seats, or even sections of the fuselage lying undisturbed for years was as heartbreaking as it was haunting. Experts combed through the footage for days, comparing the shapes to Boeing schematics, overlaying outlines and checking proportions. Some fragments seemed to match, but others were less clear, leaving room for doubt. Was this truly MH370, or was it debris from an older maritime accident? The ocean floor is littered with the remains of centuries of shipwrecks and even lost cargo, making certainty difficult. Still, the eerie similarity to parts of an aircraft kept suspicions alive. What made these first discoveries so chilling was not only the possibility that they belonged to MH370, but also the way they were positioned. The wreckage didn't appear in one neat cluster. It was scattered, as if the plane had broken apart violently on impact. Some experts suggested this meant the aircraft hit the water at high speed, shattering into fragments. Others wondered if strong currents had carried pieces far from the main fuselage. Either way, the footage painted a grim picture of what may have happened in those final moments. And yet, despite the significance of these discoveries, no single piece was enough to close the case. Each chilling find raised more questions than answers, leaving investigators caught between hope and frustration. The ocean had given a glimpse, but not the full story. Instead, it felt as though the seabed was teasing humanity, offering fragments of truth, but never the whole. The terrifying footage. When the underwater drones finally returned with their recordings, the analysts who reviewed the material expected hours of barren ocean floor. Instead, they stumbled across images that sent shivers through the room. On the grainy feed, there appeared to be twisted fragments of metal resting eerily against the seabed. At first glance, it looked like scattered debris, but as the footage rolled on, the shapes became more haunting. Sharp edges, broken beams, and shadows that almost mimicked the outline of an aircraft's body created a scene that was impossible to dismiss casually. The deep-sea silence around it only made the footage feel more suffocating, as though the wreckage itself was frozen in time, untouched since that fateful night. What made the images so disturbing wasn't just the presence of metal fragments, it was their arrangement. Some pieces seemed to lie chaotically, as you might expect after a crash, but others looked oddly aligned, almost deliberate in the way they were resting. This strange organization sparked a wave of speculation among investigators and the public alike. Was it simply the result of currents slowly repositioning the wreckage over years? Or was there something more intentional about the way the pieces were scattered? For experts who had studied countless shipwrecks and crashes, this felt different. There was a weight to the imagery that carried more questions than answers. The more the footage was analyzed, the more eerie details emerged. One section showed what looked like a large, hollow cylinder lying partially buried in the sand, its edges jagged as though torn apart by immense force. Another showed panels bent at unnatural angles, pointing into the darkness like skeletal fingers. Even though no one could conclusively say it belonged to MH370, the visual similarities to parts of a Boeing 777 were impossible to ignore. Aviation specialists pointed out that some details matched the dimensions of the missing aircraft, though they also warned that the ocean was filled with other forms of debris, from old ships to lost cargo containers. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of the footage was its atmosphere. Watching it felt like stepping into another world, one stripped of light and sound. The camera moved slowly across the ocean floor, its spotlight cutting through black water to reveal fragments half buried in silt. The silence was deafening. No movement, no life, just cold wreckage lying still. Some experts admitted privately that reviewing the material gave them nightmares, because it wasn't just metal they were seeing. It was the ghost of a tragedy, a frozen reminder of 239 lives lost without explanation. For the families of those on board, the release of this footage was bittersweet. On one hand, it was the first time in years that they could look at something tangible, something that might hold the truth. On the other hand, the imagery was so haunting that it reopened wounds many had tried to heal. Seeing twisted beams and shattered panels reminded them of the violent end their loved ones might have faced. And for some, that was unbearable. Yet despite the pain, many argued it was better than silence. It was proof that the search wasn't over, and that hope still flickered. Even among scientists, the footage has sparked endless debate. Some argue it shows definitive signs of an aircraft wreck, while others insist the shapes could be geological formations or remnants from older shipwrecks. The ambiguity is what makes it terrifying. No matter how much you analyze it, the footage refuses to give a clear answer. And in that uncertainty lies the true horror. It's not just about what was seen, it's about what still remains hidden, lurking just out of sight in the endless blackness of the Indian Ocean. The human side of the mystery. Behind every headline about MH370 lies a human story that is often overshadowed by speculation, technology, and theories. For the families of the 239 people who boarded that flight, the disappearance wasn't just a news event, it was the day their lives were split in two. For them, the mystery has never been abstract. It's personal, visceral, and ongoing. Parents lost children, children lost parents, and spouses were left with questions that no one could answer. Every time new drone footage surfaces or a new expedition sets sail, these families are pulled back into a cycle of hope and despair. The footage of twisted beams and possible wreckage doesn't just represent metal. It represents the lives that once filled that plane with laughter, fear, conversations, and dreams. Many family members have spoken publicly about how difficult it is to grieve without closure. Traditional mourning rituals require finality, a body to bury, a grave to visit, a tangible marker of loss. But with MH370, that finality never arrived. Instead, loved ones were left with silence, waiting for phone calls that would never come, hoping for answers that remained just beyond reach. Some held on to the belief that the passengers might still be alive, clinging to wild theories because accepting the alternative was too painful. Others grew angry, channeling their grief into activism, pressuring governments and agencies to continue the search. In both cases, the lack of certainty shaped not only their private sorrow, but also their public voices. The human cost of this tragedy extends beyond the families, too. The airline industry, pilots, and frequent flyers were forced to reckon with the possibility that in the age of satellites and global positioning, a modern jetliner could still vanish without a trace. Flight crews reported heightened anxiety, while passengers admitted to thinking differently every time they stepped onto a plane. For some, the story of MH370 became a symbol of vulnerability in a world that prides itself on being connected and technologically advanced. Even people with no direct connection to the passengers felt a lingering unease, haunted by the thought, if it could happen once, could it happen again? Ultimately, the human side of the MH370 mystery reminds us that beyond sonar maps, drones, and theories, this is a story of people. Each statistic in the reports was once a living, breathing individual with aspirations, families, and futures ahead of them. Every discovery on the seabed, whether a piece of wreckage or a faint shadow caught on camera, carries the weight of those lives. It's why this mystery remains so powerful, because at its core, it's not about a plane, but about 239 people who never made it home. Why this matters. The disappearance of MH370 matters not only because of the people lost, but because of what it revealed about the fragile systems humanity depends on. The event shattered the illusion of absolute security in modern aviation. For decades, we believed that planes could always be tracked, that satellites could see anything, anywhere, at any time. MH370 proved otherwise. A massive Boeing 777, one of the safest, most reliable aircraft ever built, vanished in one of the most monitored eras in human history, and we still don't know exactly how. This wasn't just an aviation story. It was a story about the limits of human knowledge and the gaps in the technology we take for granted. Beyond aviation, the mystery forces us to confront the sheer scale and power of the oceans. Despite centuries of exploration, vast portions of Earth's seabeds remain uncharted. The oceans swallow evidence, distort signals, and hide secrets beneath crushing pressure and darkness. MH370's disappearance has highlighted how little we truly know about the world we live in. It's a reminder that in our age of smartphones, satellites, and artificial intelligence, nature can still humble us. The terrifying footage captured by drones doesn't just reveal fragments of wreckage, it reveals the ocean's ability to guard mysteries for years, perhaps forever. There's also a moral weight to why this matters. The families deserve answers, and humanity deserves to learn from this tragedy. Each mystery left unresolved carries the risk of repeating itself. Understanding MH370 is not just about closure, it's about prevention. What if the same vulnerabilities that allowed this disappearance still exist? What if another plane were to vanish under similar circumstances? Solving this mystery isn't only about honoring the dead, it's about protecting the living, ensuring no other families have to endure the same unending uncertainty. Finally, MH370 matters because it has become part of our cultural memory, a symbol of unanswered questions in an age that prides itself on having all the answers. It stands alongside other great human mysteries, the lost colony of Roanoke, the fate of Amelia Earhart, the secrets of the pyramids, except this one happened in our time, on our watch, in a world where we thought nothing could simply disappear. That's why it continues to haunt us, because it reminds us of our limits, of the fragility of human progress, and of the deep unknowns still waiting in the dark corners of our world. The strange theories. As soon as the drone footage became public, theories began to multiply. Some viewers were convinced the images confirmed the wreckage of MH370, pointing to structural similarities between the debris and a Boeing 777. Others, however, saw something different. They suggested the wreckage was too organized, too deliberate in its placement, almost as though someone had staged it. This strange orderliness gave rise to speculation that the crash site might have been manipulated or even hidden intentionally. Among the most persistent theories was the idea of a cover-up. Some claim that governments knew the truth about MH370, but were deliberately withholding it from the public, perhaps to avoid political scandal or to conceal sensitive information about what the plane was carrying. The footage, in this view, was either leaked accidentally or carefully released to keep public interest alive without revealing the full story. For conspiracy theorists, the haunting drone images were not evidence of discovery, but evidence of deception. Other theories leaned toward the supernatural. The eerie silence of the footage, the strange shadows across twisted beams, and the almost ghostly quality of the ocean floor led some to suggest the site was cursed, or that the plane's disappearance was tied to forces beyond human understanding. While these ideas sound far-fetched, they spread rapidly online, fueled by the emotional weight of the tragedy and humanity's deep-seated fear of the unknown. The more unsettling the footage appeared, the easier it was for imaginations to run wild. Still, the most grounded theories revolved around the crash itself. Some experts believed the footage suggested a high-speed impact, with the plane breaking apart instantly upon hitting the water. Others thought the wreckage pattern pointed to a controlled descent that ended in disaster, raising uncomfortable questions about whether the pilots might have been involved. The lack of a definitive narrative kept all these possibilities alive, each one feeding into the broader uncertainty that defined the MH370 mystery. Theories also expanded beyond the crash site to include global politics. A few speculated that MH370 may have been intercepted or diverted because of sensitive cargo, technology, weapons, or even individuals that powerful forces wanted silenced. The drone footage, in this sense, was seen as proof not of an accident, but of a cover-up stretching across international borders. For those who distrusted authority, every blurry shadow in the recordings was further evidence of secrets buried beneath the waves. Ultimately, the strange theories surrounding the footage reflected one truth: in the absence of certainty, speculation fills the void. Humans are wired to find patterns, to seek meaning in chaos, and to connect dots, even when they don't align perfectly. For MH370, the terrifying footage didn't just reveal fragments of wreckage, it opened the door to countless interpretations, each one stranger and more unsettling than the last. The role of private explorers. While governments eventually scaled back their official search efforts, declaring the mission too costly and too uncertain, private explorers stepped into the void. Independent adventurers, wealthy philanthropists, and even small tech companies began deploying their own resources to keep the search alive. For them, this wasn't just about money. It was about determination, legacy, and sometimes even obsession. The disappearance of MH370 had become a puzzle too significant to abandon, and private explorers refused to let it fade into silence. One of the most striking aspects of private exploration was the use of innovative, often experimental technology. Without the bureaucratic red tape that slowed governments, these explorers could test new drone designs, deploy unconventional sonar systems, and take risks official agencies avoided. Some even turned to crowdfunding, rallying support from people around the world who wanted the search to continue. It became a grassroots mission, fueled by the belief that ordinary people could succeed where global powers had failed. Private explorers also brought a personal touch that official investigations lacked. Many were motivated not by politics or contracts, but by compassion for the families who still had no closure. Some were aviation enthusiasts, determined to restore faith in the industry. Others were adventurers drawn to the challenge of uncovering the ocean's darkest secrets. In every case, their work was driven by passion rather than obligation, which gave the search a new energy, even as years passed. However, their efforts were not without controversy. Critics argued that some private missions exploited the tragedy, chasing publicity or funding while offering little real progress. Others raised concerns about safety and credibility. After all, not every explorer had the expertise to operate in such hostile environments. The ocean doesn't forgive mistakes, and several privately funded expeditions faced setbacks that highlighted just how difficult the task remained. Still, the role of private explorers cannot be understated. They have kept the mystery of MH370 alive in the public consciousness, ensuring that the world does not forget the passengers and crew who vanished. By pushing technology forward and challenging conventional limits, they have also contributed to broader knowledge about our oceans. In many ways, their persistence reflects the very best of human nature: the refusal to accept the unknown, the determination to keep searching, even when hope seems faint. In the end, the involvement of private explorers shows how one tragedy can inspire global action. MH370 wasn't just a loss for the families. It became a mystery for all humanity. And while governments may have stepped back, private hands have carried the torch, diving into the abyss with a mix of courage, desperation, and relentless curiosity. Whether they will ever uncover the final truth remains uncertain, but their role has already changed the way we think about exploration and responsibility in times of collective tragedy. What happens next? Now that footage exists, the big question is, what happens next? For investigators, the priority is verification. Is the wreckage truly from MH370? Can any parts be recovered for study? The logistics of such a mission are staggering. Retrieving objects from miles below the surface requires specialized equipment, enormous funding, and time. And even if debris is recovered, analyzing it could take years. Meanwhile, the public waits. Every new headline reignites interest. Every new rumor stirs speculation. Families, most of all, cling to the hope that answers are coming, even if they are painful. What happens next will define not only the legacy of MH370, but also the future of ocean exploration. Because if one drone could find this, what else might be waiting in the darkness of the deep? The ocean still holds secrets. In the end, MH370 is more than a tragedy. It's a reminder of the ocean's vastness. We often think of Earth as fully mapped, fully known, but the truth is sobering. More than 80% of the world's oceans remain unexplored. That means most of our own planet is still a mystery. The disappearance of MH370 forced humanity to confront this reality. A plane vanishing in the 21st century feels impossible until you realize how little we know about the seas. The underwater footage is terrifying, not just because of what it shows, but because of what it suggests. If something as massive as a Boeing 777 can hide in plain sight, what else is down there? What other stories lie silent beneath the waves? The search for MH370 may someday end, but the ocean's mysteries will never truly be solved. And maybe that's what makes this story so haunting. It is not just about one flight, but about the vast, uncharted world that still surrounds us. So, did the underwater drone finally capture the resting place of MH370? Or is the ocean still guarding its darkest secret? Whatever the truth, the footage reminds us how fragile life is, and how little we really know about the world beneath the waves. What do you think? Did the drone truly find MH370? Or is there more to the story than we're being told? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.